Good evening from London and welcome to another lockdown lecture with Harif. We are the UK Association of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa, and we aim to raise awareness of the history and culture of Jews from that region. Do check out our website, which is www.harif.org. We have a very full program, most of it on Zoom. And to get the login details for each event, you really need to be on our mailing list and you will get regular information. Do also check out our sister website, Point of No Return, which keeps you up to date with the news. This event is being recorded. There will be a video uploaded to the website in due course, and it's also being live streamed to the Harif Facebook page. And if anyone is out there on the Facebook page, you can actually put your questions to our speaker and get answers to them as well. If you'd like to comment or ask questions, please do write them or type them in the chat box at the bottom of your screen there. Our speaker will speak for about an hour and then there will be an opportunity to ask questions. Well, tonight's topic is one we haven't really touched on very much since we started these Zoom lectures, and that is the Jews of Yemen. And we are particularly going to focus on the Jews of Yemen in modern times. How isolated was this community from the general Jewish world? What happened to them during the Holocaust? How successful was their absorption into Israel? About 50,000 Jews emigrated to Israel, and it seems that the community is really on the verge of extinction now, as far as I can tell, and perhaps our speaker will correct or confirm this. I think there are 6 Jews still left in Yemen today. So we are absolutely delighted to welcome Dr. Dov Levitan, who is an expert on Yemenite Jewry, and he's also chair of the Department of Multidisciplinary Studies at Ashkelon Academic College in Israel. So welcome, Dr. Levitan, and over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to meet you. Erev Tov, Chodesh Tov, and thank you for hosting me and being ready to listen to my lecture. I want to share the screen because I want you to see my presentation. Lynn, just tell me if you can see the presentation, the first.
Yes, I can actually see all the slideshow on the sidebar there.
Yeah, that's with intention. But you can see the main slides. Okay.
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. From time to time, I'm going to interrupt to be sure that all of you can follow me. So we're going to discuss tonight the modern history of the Yemenite Jewry. I just want to mention that it's a very ancient Jewry, and we have got letters, documents, also from the Middle Age and even from before that. I'm going to focus upon the modern times. And when I refer to modern times, I speak about the last 260, 270 years. It means from the second half of the 18th century. And I want also from time to time to go up to our day. So if you look at the very first slide, you can see here a picture of some Yemenite Jews in Sana'a, where that is a situation you can't see anymore. The picture here was taken a few years ago. because actually there's no Jewish life left in Yemen. Last week, actually this week, our president, Yitzhak Herzog, was visiting the Emirates, and when he was in Dubai, ballistic missile was launched by the Houthis from Yemen and hit Dubai. No one was hurt, not the regular population, and neither not the tiny Jewish community that you can see here, Herzog together with their rabbi. There are a few hundred Jews there. What is interesting that among those Jews are there certain Jews, which actually was the last core of the Jewish community. They were expelled, or should we say, pushed out of Yemen by the Houthis. They were actually forced to leave 10 months ago, the end of March last year. So we can't see any real Jewish life, even if there are a few individuals left besides the 6 people you just mentioned. There are also a few women, Jewish women who married Yemenites, but they are, I think, already totally assimilated. If you look at the picture here, it's a sad one. It's the burial of a Jew. He was in a raiders located here a little south of Sanaa, the capital, and he was the leader, the rabbi of the community in Raider. His name was Masha, which means Moshe Nahari, and he was murdered in 2008 by a former Air Force pilot, and this Air Force pilot was very, very proud of what he did, as you can see here from the Yemen Times, and he claimed not only to be proud, but he said if Jews will continue to stay in Raider, he will personally kill them. And that was actually the end of Jewish life outside Sanaa. And the last Jews were living for a number of years on a compound in Sanaa, taken care of by the President Salah, as you can see here. And every year, some Jews left until we reached a situation that, as I said before, no Jewish life is existing today in Yemen. However, it means that you can't see the pictures that you could see here just a few years ago. However, I don't think we have to be sad. We don't have to be sorry, because Yemen was not such an easy place to conduct Jewish life. And the fact is that Jewish heritage, I speak about Yemen Jewish heritage and culture, is flourishing, and it will exist for many years, maybe for generations, mainly, of course, in Israel. A few words about Yemen. Yemen is a very big country. It's a territory of 555 square kilometers, which means more or less the size of France. It has got a population which is growing rapidly today of more than 30 million inhabitants. It's a very, very poor country, the poorest of all the 22 Arab countries. Life there is very, very difficult, especially because of the tension and the civil wars, which have taken place so many years, including the last one. The infant mortality is very high, 76 out of 1,000 people. A lot of people are living, should we say, for under $2 or $2.50 a day, and quite a number. I speak about 10,000 of people, especially children, are actually starving. So again, we don't have to be so sorry that Jews are not living there. Let's just hope that they can maintain their heritage. Now, as I said before, I want to focus upon modern times. And we are now in the second part of the 18th century. And a delegation of research arrived to Yemen in 1762. And it's a fantastic way of exploring Yemen. that the first time, not only that should we say scientific investigation or exploring of Yemen took place, that's the first time that a scientific delegation is known in history all over the world, and it was sent by the Danish king. He financed it, 7 people, but it was more or less international minded. There were Swedes, Germans, Danes, and so on. And it's so important because they planned everything and they recorded everything. Now, there were no, of course, cameras at that time, but an artist was was a member of delegation, and he drew pictures. So we have got quite interesting data and evidence from that delegation. Now, you can see here the first, the picture here is the Mocha coffee plantation. There's a woman here, local woman, a Yemenite woman. Now, it's especially interesting because the aim of the delegation was not especially to meet with Jews, but to explore Yemen. But in their records, we find quite a number of incidents of that they met Jews, and they tell exactly what they met. So I want to just to mention 2 or 3 of these things. They came to a little town close to the shore, the coast of the Red Sea. And there they tell, we met an old Jew and he invited them to his house. One member of the delegation commanded the Arabic language, so he was the translator. And you see, this Yemenite Jew, he wanted to impress the people coming from Europe. So what did he do? He took a book that he had and showed them the book. Now, it was a Talmud printed in Amsterdam, I think 70 or 80 years ago. And it's interesting because it shows us that on one hand, the Yemenite Jewry was isolated. On the other hand, they had certain connections with other Jewish communities. And the fact is that you can find Jewish books as the Talmud, like like it was recorded in their reports. A second thing, if you look up here with the hills, it's a city, a town called Taiz. There was a big Jewish community there. Now, should we say the delegation, the destiny of most of the members of the delegation was very tragic, because 6 out of 7 members simply passed away on the journey, and only one stayed alive and could go back to Denmark and hand over all his or present his records and so on. However, when they went close to Thais, one of the members of the delegation passed away. Now, due to the fact that they were Christians, they buried him in a wooden coffin, as you can see here. Now, the local Arabs, the Muslims, were not used to that. They didn't understand why are they doing that. So the same evening, a rumor was spread that he was buried in a coffin because there was a treasure there. There was a lot of gold together with the dead man. So in the evening, or in the night, the local Muslims started to dig up, open the coffin, but they found only the dead body. So they left it there. But they had a problem. Who was going now to bury it again? They didn't want to touch it because it was not clean. It was a Christian, not a Muslim. So the local Jews were told to do it. But they said, we'll pay you for it. You can have the coffin. Now, this is just a little story, but it shows us a little about the position of the Jews within the society in Taiz or in Yemen. They were not at the same level as the local Arabs. They were discriminated. Maybe they were tolerated, but not very much than that. The last picture we can see here, the drawing, is a Jewish residence in Ka'el Yahud, which was a suburb just outside the city walls of Sana'a, the capital. And it's again interesting for us because just a few decades before the delegation came to Yemen, the Jews were expelled to a distant desert under the most terrible conditions. Thousands, 10,000 of them passed away, and then they were allowed to go back to the different towns. And what we understand here from the delegation is that the Jews in Sana'a managed to restore their Jewish community life. And it was also reported by the delegation that altogether there were about 5,000 Jews, Jewish families in Yemen at that time, again, second half of the 18th century, which means there should have been somehow, I think, between, it could be estimated, 20 to 25,000 Jews. And as we can see from that point and further on, the Jewish population continued to grow. I want to move up to our next stop, if we can call it like that. Lynn, just tell me that you're with me. Okay.
Yes, we're with you. We can see.
Thank you.
We can hear.
Thank you. Okay, we are proceeding 100 years. We are now in the end of the 19th century. We are about 1880, 82. Should we say we are going into the Zionistic era, what we call the first aliyah, the first wave of immigration, the second wave of immigration, the establishment of new villages, which later on became towns and cities like Rehovot, Nes Ziona, Gedera, Rosh Pina, and so on. Now, what is interesting, that exactly at the same time, a lot of Yemenites are immigrating to Israel. Now, also before we had Yemenites coming to Israel, but as individuals. Now there's a way, we call it Lepet Amal, and there are two approaches. Why did the Yemenites come now in big groups, families together, and so on? So one approach is that they were influenced and they heard about the Zionistic era and this establishment of a new Zionistic, should we call it pioneering community in Israel. But the other approach said there's no connection between them, and some even claim that the Yemenites came earlier. However, the Yemenite population in Israel is growing. About now 1911 and 12, and a missionary, Shaliach, is sent to Yemen to bring more, to call for more Yemenites, because they were very good labor, especially agricultural labors, and the Yemenite Jews came. Now we are entering now the time of the English mandate, which means we are just after the conclusion of World War I, and the Yemenites also tried to organize themselves, and the most prominent member, the leader, I would say the leader of the Jews, Yemenite Jews in Israel, was this gentleman here called Zcharia Glusker, a very interesting person, born in 1895 in Yemen, came to Israel when he was 15 years old, together with his family. Already 5 years later, he was among the founders of the Histadrut, the labor union, which means he was pretty close to the circle of people around Ben Gurion. However, already 2 years later, he breaks out, and with a group of Yemenites, they established their own organization called Itachdut HaTemanim. The reason was that he claimed, and he said, we are not respected enough, we are not represented the right way, we have to represent ourselves. Now this claim, this argument that the Yemenites on one hand, people like them very much, they're very sympathetic, they're very nice, but they are kept a little down, a little discriminated, especially on, should we call it the political level and so on. That's a claim that we are going to hear for many, many years, for decades, already in the time of the mandate and also later on. I want to move over to the next stop. We are now moving up to the 40s of the 20th century. First of all, I was asked before how many Jews, Yemenite Jews are there in Israel today, and I said the answer is a little complicated because we haven't got exact records, and there's also the intermarriage and so on. But if you ask me about the time of the English mandate, the 40s, the outbreak of World War II, there were somehow between, should we say, 20 to 28,000 Jews. It depends if you count the second and the third generation. By the way, the Yemenites themselves, the organization, claimed that in the 40s, they already numbered about 35,000 Jews. Now, we don't have to go into all the small details, but what is quite sure that if the should we say in the 40s, there were about 450,000 Jews in Israel. The Yemenite were about 7-8%. So it was quite an important and significant numbers of Yemenite Jews in Israel. Now I want to go to the next topic, and that is the Yemenite Jewry and the Holocaust. I think we could have. The assumption must be that there's actually no connection, because as we all know, World War II didn't reach actually Yemen, and the Nazis and Hitler and the Germans, they didn't get there. The closest you can speak about pro-Nazism is maybe Iraq and Baghdad, Rashid Ali, and so on. So actually, there should be no connection, but this is wrong. There's a very strong connection between the Yemenite Jewry and the Holocaust, and it can be presented on two levels. The first level is the spiritual, should we call it the religious level, and the second level is the practical level. I'll speak first of all about the spiritual level. A few years ago, I had a meeting with this rabbi, you can see here, Rabbi Shlomo Korach, who was the Sephardic chief rabbi of Bnei Brak. Don't ask me, because that's another question. How can a Yemenite be the Sephardic rabbi? But okay, that's another question. We were acquainted, and I had some documents I wanted to show him, and afterwards we sat down in his office and spoke, and then he asked me, "Tell me, what are you doing now? Are you only conducting research and teaching about the Yemenites?" And I said, "No, I've just started teaching army officers a course about the Holocaust." And then we started to speak about the Holocaust. And then I said to him, "I understand that in Yemen, which was pretty isolated, you didn't know anything about the Holocaust when it went on." He said, "No, you're wrong. We did know what was going on." He said, "Maybe not in the smaller communities around Yemen, but in the capital, in Sana'a, where I lived." And Rabbi Shlomo Korach, that was his family, his grandfather was a very famous rabbi. He was the leader of the Beis Din there. He was actually some kind of a chief rabbi, not only for Sana'a, but for the entire Jewish community in Yemen. He said, "We heard of what happened." You said you have to understand, maybe we didn't know exactly the map of Europe. We didn't know maybe the borders of Germany and Russia and France and so on. But we know that something awful was going on. We know that 1,000, 10,000, and 100,000 of Jews were killed, were murdered. We heard about it. We heard of that, what they did to our sisters and to our brothers. And then I said, "And then what did you do?" He said, "We sat down, we cried. I cried as a child together with my grandfather. And then we prayed and said Tehillim, Psalms. And then we went back again and we were sitting crying." Well, that's one level. Well, the second level is also very interesting. It's a little tragic, but this is what happened. We have to remember, we speak about the 40s. In 39, a new policy of the British government in Israel was, actually in London, was presented, namely the White Book, limiting the possibility of buying land in Israel, and especially limiting the immigration to Israel and cutting it down to about 15,000 certificates of aliyah, of immigration per year. Now, originally, most of the Jews who came from Central Europe, Eastern Europe, but due to the war and the occupation of Nazi Germany, all these Jews couldn't emigrate anymore. We all know what happened. They went to the concentration camps or worse. So the Jewish agencies, the leadership, the management were left with thousands of certificates. And there were no candidates for them. There came some Jews from Turkey and from North Africa, but not very much so. So it was decided to direct these certificates, these permissions of immigration, to the Yemenites. And what happened was that the Jews in Yemen hear that it's possible to make aliyah, to emigrate to Israel, and thousands of Jews start to walk from north and central Yemen down to the south to Aden. Aden was a British crown colony, and that was also the, should we call it, the port of departure, of embarking, because they came to Israel on ships. Now, this is a fantastic event. It's so important because we don't speak about a few hundreds. We speak about 4,500, to be more exact, around 4,300, which came mainly in 1943, 1944, and even in 1945. And this is the first precedence, the first case of what I call mass immigration. Mass immigration, according to the way that I defined it, is that you have got a Jewish community and a defined territory like Yemen, and they are brought to a place where they are getting together in an absorption camp. In this case, it was Aden. And then they are organized, in this case by the Jewish agency, and sent to Israel by steamers, by boats. And in Israel, they are absorbed also in absorption camps. And this is actually what is going also to happen about 6-7 years later, after the state was established. But the first time it was practiced was with the Yemenite Jews. So on one hand, this is fantastic. It's very tragic that the reason that so many Jews from Yemen could come was due to the Holocaust. Now, I have underlined the importance of making it possible practicing the Jewish immigration from Yemen. On the other hand, I have to tell you the truth. On one hand, you see the Jewish leaders here in Israel, from the Jewish agency and the authorities, the local Jews authorities, Zionistic authorities in Israel, Palestine at that time, they wanted them. They wanted the Yemenite Jews, but on the other hand, they didn't treat them very nice. I just want to show you two documents. This is sent in 43 from the office of the Jewish agency in Aden. I can assure you, at the time of enlistment, every prospective immigrant is being clearly told that on his arrival in Palestine, he has to go to work by any place he is ordered by you. And well, I raised the question is, would the same thing be written about an immigrant from Europe? I have to tell you the truth, I doubt. And another document from the same period, that's about the accommodations on the shipping, on the boat, on the steamer to, as you can see here, the map, they embarked the Aden port, and then they went via the Red Sea, and then up to the Suez Channel to Port Said, and then mostly by boat to Israel. There were also some who came by train through the Sinai Desert. So listen what's written here in one of the letters. These refugees, they were treated as refugees, and as a matter of fact, they were refugees, because in the 40s, the situation in Yemen again was terrible. The internal political tension, as well as the people were starving because there was not enough agricultural production to feed the people. So they can be recognized as refugees. The refugees may be transported in cargo boats, and it's not necessary to bother about beds, food, etc. All it's necessary is to have sufficient lifebelts on the steamer. Almost immediately after coming into the country, the refugees are sent to productive work. Well, I think you have to agree with me. On one hand, you want them to come to Israel, Palestine at that time, and the other time, and you know that it is important. On the other time, the way that they were treated, should we say, they were not really respected in a nice way. Before I move over to the next stop, Lynn, just tell me that you are with me.
Yes, I'm with you.
Okay, thank you. So I move up to the should we say, the next stage or the next point of our lecture. We are moving now 3 years forward. We are now in, I'll just make it a little smaller. I think that's better. Okay, we are now in December 1947, riots in Aden. It's one of the worst, most terrible events I could speak about in modern times, and close to the establishment of the State of Israel. We are about 3 days after the so important resolution of the Special Assembly of the UN concerning the plan of partition, dividing the land of Israel, of Palestine, into 2 states, a Jewish one and an Arab one, 29th of November 1947. Now, Arabs around the Arabic world, both in Palestine, but especially also outside, were very angry. They opposed this resolution, and that include also Arabs, Muslims in Aden. Now, again, Aden was still a British crown colony until 1967, and on December the 2nd, they start to attack Jews. Now, the Jews were living, should we say, at 3 centers. One center was the community in Aden. A second center was an absorption camp called Geula, about 15, 20 kilometers outside the city of Aden. Those were Jews who wanted in the 40s to emigrate to Israel, but in 45, England or Britain, who controlled both the port of departure, Aden, as well as the port of arrival, Haifa or Palestine, they cut down and they didn't let the Jews emigrate anymore. So, and there were thousands of Jews waiting for immigration. So some of them went back to Yemen, but about a little more than 2,200 stayed in Aden, and a camp was put up for them, run by the Joint and by the Jewish agency. So that was the second center where Jews, and there was a little village called Sheikh Othman, and also with a few hundred Jews living. Now, it was simply terrible. Altogether, 90 Jews were murdered in Aden and Sheikh Othman. 55 were wounded. Jewish-owned houses were burned, as well as schools and synagogues. You can see here on the picture a Jewish house after it had been burned down, and there's also some Jewish cars. Now, just a few words about the Jewish community in Aden. The major part of the Jews in Aden were not Yemenite. They were originally from Iraq. They were from India. There were also some from Britain, and together with them there were the Yemenites. Some of the Yemenites had settled down and were pretty well off financially, and a lot of them were those refugees who wanted to go to Israel, Palestine, but couldn't do it, and they were living there under hard conditions. So they were attacked, and as you can see here, 2 other houses belonging to Jews simply destructed and burned down, and the Jews are calling for help. And the British authorities totally failed. In the beginning, they sent a special battalion, which was formed mainly by local Arabs, and that was just to make the situation even worse, because they joined the riots against the Jews. And then 3 days after, forces from the English army, which were stationed in Egypt, close to the Suez zone, were sent by aeroplanes, and then they managed to stop it. Now, we know about the terrible events because the Jewish community in Aden, again, being an English crown colony, had connections with the Jewish community in London. And they sent them a telegram and they asked, help us, yes, stop. Almost all Jewish merchant shops, as you can see here, were burned and looted, stop. Over 140 Jews, men and women and children were shot dead. Well, we know that in the end, the number was a little lower. It was about 90, but that was more than enough. And wounded, including some burned alive and kidnapped, stop. Finally, British forces in transit miraculously arrived. I don't think it was a miracle. I think that the British authorities simply failed and stopped violence. Otherwise, whole Asian Jewry would have been wiped out. We can, I think, agree that it was a terrible experience. Now, I spoke about 3 centers. In Aden, there were riots. In the little town, Sheikh Othman, 17 Jews were murdered. There was one place, and it's interesting that the Arabs didn't dare to go in, and that was this absorption camps, the Camp Geula, where they stayed more than 2,200 Jews. They were prepared to fight. The only Jews who were organized to fight, they didn't have any shotguns, but they prepared what we call cold weapons, axes, knives, and so on. And there was a rumor spread among the local Arabs that the Jews, they are organized and they have got weapons, so they were not touched. We are going now to our next point, and 14th of May, Yom Ha'atzmaut, proclamation of the State of Israel. You have got here the Declaration of Independence, all the prominent, important people from, including, of course, Ben Gurion, Sharet, and so on, signed. And it's interesting because there's also a representative of the Yemenite Jews in Israel, Sadia Kubashi. Now, the fact that the Jewish state was established has got huge influence on the Jews, both in Aden as well as in Yemen. And now start an operation which I think I can only use the word fantastic. We call it in Hebrew Al-Kanfei Nisharim. Operation on Wings of Eagles just 2 weeks ago. We read in the Parsha on Shabbat, Vayisaytchem al Kanfei Nisharim v'avi etchem elai, I will bring you to me on eagle wings. It was also called Operation Magic Carpet. That's an expression which doesn't fit so much. And the first Jews to be brought to Israel were those waiting, the refugees, those who stayed in the camp, and those who were left in Aden, about a little more than 4,000. And then the British authorities demanded the camp has to be dismantled, shut down, and they thought, that's it. Now we have solved all the problems with the Yemenite Jews. But the problem, if you can call it like that, the issue was not shut down because the Jews of Yemen who lived in Yemen, and there were about 50,000 of them, heard that a state was established. And then Jews started to walk, first of all, to sell their houses and belongings, property, etc. And they started to walk down from the north and the south and getting into Aden, because they knew that from Aden they might be able to continue to Israel. Now in Aden there was no accommodation for them, so a little camp was established in Khashed, close to the old camp, but it was even not huts. It was just, should we say, just shelters for the sun or something like that, and maybe 800 to 2,000 people could live there maximum. And the people, the Jews are arriving all the time, totally exhausted, in a very, very difficult medical situation. Their health was so bad, and about 13,000 people are getting together there, and they want to continue. Now you can see there was a little medical staff there sent from Israel, and they said, we cannot handle the situation. We are more acting as Chevra Kadisha, which means we are taking care of, we are foreign people. Now in Israel, and maybe it doesn't seem so nice, but that's a fact, a very, very hard dispute took place, because not all of the leaders thought that the Yemenite Jews should be brought to Israel. Yitzhak Greenbaum, who was a treasurer of the Jewish Agency, and later on the first minister of Interior, said, let's stop the immigration from Yemen. It should be stopped and postponed. The Yemenite Jews are sick and will be a heavy burden for Israel to absorb. We can't manage it. There was another one from the board of the Jewish Agency, Dubkin. Dubkin said, listen, the Yemenite Jews have waited to immigrate to Israel for 1,000 years, so they can wait a few more years. It doesn't seem nice, but that was the discussion taking place here in Israel, because we are in the end of the war of independence, and there's not enough of housing, and not the reservoirs to feed the people. And there were friends said, let's bring other Jews. They didn't say it, but I mean what they wanted to say. Well, maybe younger people from Europe, maybe, not the Yemenites. They can come later on. The one who took the decision that the Jews of Yemen had to come now was Ben Gurion. And Ben Gurion stated in September 1949 that the reason is that the situation in Aden, and again, thousands are waiting in Aden. The situation is that the children, especially the children, the Yemenite children die like flies. We must save them. Also, mortality is high here as well. There's more effective and more faithful treatment here. And as you know, the one who took these decisions was the state creator, namely Ben Gurion. So the airlift continued, and the Jews from Yemen came. In the beginning, it was a secret operation, but later on, it was published also in the newspapers, and actually, that was almost the end of the exile of the Yemenite Jews. Now, on one hand, I think we have to really admire the airlift, more than 450 flights, 3 every day, without any breakdown, brought about 50,000 Jews to Israel. And we have to remember, a little country, the end of World War of the war, you have got a lot of troubles, no money, and so on. By the way, the airlift was financed mainly by the American Jewry. On the other hand, I want also to show you another angle, another dimension. So Ben Gurion decided to bring the Jews from Yemen, but when he met them and he saw them, I mean, the newcomers, he speaks about them in a not very friendly way. This is it's a letter written by Ben Gurion in 1950 to Yigal Yadin, who was chief of staff. The Yemenite Jew is perhaps the most difficult. It's 2,000 years away from us, if not more. He lacked the most basic and primitive concepts of civilization. His attitude towards children and women is that of a primitive man. He is not aware of hygienic needs. For thousands of years, he has immersed in one of the darkest exiles with a primitive regime. Now, so you have got here the two sides of the coin, yes? On one hand, we'll bring them, we'll provide all the help we can. On the other hand, then look at them, should we say, in a very nice way. And here I have to mention the approach of absorption. Actually, those who were in charge of the absorption looked down, I mean literally, looked down at the Jews from Yemen and said, well, we have to decide how they should be absorbed, where they should give their medical care, how to educate their children, where should they live, what exactly should they do, and so on. We call this approach the absorption through modernization, which means we want to provide the newcomers with the, should we say, the values of our society, of our European society. It doesn't sound very nice, but I'm sorry to tell you, that was the reality. Lynn, I have to be sure that you are with me because I want to show you a very short video clip.
Yes, I'm with you.
Okay, thank you. So I just say stop share. Okay, now I want to show you a video clip of about 1 minute. Okay, here it is. But I have to give you just a very, very short explanation what we're going to see. It's 1 minute. The first half a minute is in Hebrew. You see the absorption camps in Israel. It's terrible accommodations. I mean, people are living in tents. And in the winter, and it was a much harder winter than we had this year, it was 49, 50. Not only raining all the time in the winter, it was snowing. In Haifa and Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv and in Rosh Hashanah, where quite a big concentration of Yemenites were living in one of the 4 camps. So the situation, and the Yemenites, out of all Jews from, should we say, from Muslim countries, North Africa, Iraq, Persia, etc., they were staying in the absorption camps and later on in the Ma'abarot for the longest period because it was more difficult for them to get, should we say, socialized into the Israeli society. So that's the first half minute. But now comes the second half minute, and that's in English. Now, it's a video clip out of a movie which most probably was presented to the American Jewry because they financed the whole thing. But the way that they speak about those Jews is not very nice. They are called creatures. By the way, you'll hear the word creature twice because I edited. I wanted you to hear it. And they are. They say they trembled out of the airplanes. and they are people coming from the dark Middle Age, and they have now to be modernized. It's a great job which is in front of us. I don't think that anyone would be allowed to present such a movie today. Yeah, I don't speak just about Me Too and pulling down all the statues and so on, yes? But that was the way they looked upon these Jews. On one hand, they wanted them to come here. On the other hand, they are not exactly on our level. So I excuse, it's not so nice, but we have to understand the atmosphere of that period. So I just make share screen, and I hope it will work. Oh no, I made a mistake. Just a minute. Make a little mistake. I'll do it once more. Share screen. Yeah, okay. Okay, we started.
באלפים ולאיש אין שליטה
You can just tell me if you can
תוך
see
3
it.
שנים שולש מספר התושבים. ב-1949 עלו לארץ 250,000 עולים מכל הארצות. בתחומי מחנות הצבא הבריטיים הוקמו ערי אוהלים. יורי יוסף טל, ראש מחלקת הקליטה של הסוכנות, צפה קטסטרופה במחנות העולים. דיונים על עצירת העלייה התנהלו בסודי סודות. לתוך המהומה הזו הגיעו 50,000 עולי תימן. הייתה זו אוכלוסייה שאינה מעורה כלל בתרבות המערבית. בסרטי ההסברה הם הוצגו בצורה הבאה.
And now they tumble out, hungry, often airsick, looking like creatures from the Arabian Nights. It's a colorful sight, but scarcely a pretty one. Yet you watch and wonder. You walk among them and you ponder how much work, how much skilled effort will be needed to bridge the centuries, to take these representatives of the Middle Ages and assimilate them into a progressive Western civilization.
יחס זה.
Okay, I want to go back and show us the. Yeah. Okay. Lynn, can you see the presentation again, the slide?
Yeah.
It's fine, yeah.
No problem.
Okay, I'm moving forward because I've got a few more things I would like to mention. The situation in the absorption camps was terrible. So many people passed away, especially the children, and that's actually, to say, some kind of an introduction to the case of the missing Yemenite children. But the children came like the child here, who was actually starving, and tried to provide them a lot of volunteers, doctors, nurses, and so on, with the best help they could get. However, I would say in the end, the absorption worked out because the Yemenites, already from the 60s, 70s, and especially today, are integrated in all fields of life because they're journalists, they are a lot in education. The best singers in Israel are the Yemenites. The 3 European festivals which we won, they were all Yemenites. In the agricultural settlements, in the juridical system, writers, in the high tech. Some of the best football players are Yemenites, rabbis, in the security forces, and so on. There's only actually one field where they are not really represented, and that's going back to what I already mentioned about Salia Gluska and the time of the British mandate. They never had no real success in politics. I don't know if they have to be sad or not sad. I want to move on. I know that we are a little short of time, so I just mention the case of the missing Yemenite children. You see, it's an issue that I've been dealing with for the last 40 years. We speak about Yemenite children who were separated from their parents when they arrived into the camps in order to provide them with better accommodations, not the tents, but houses, hospitals, children homes, and so on. And then usually the mother used to come in the morning or in the evening or both in order to breastfeed the child. And very often they were told, your child has passed away, or he has been transferred to a hospital. And on most of these occasions, speak about hundreds, the parents didn't attend the funeral, but usually they believed in what they were told. They had a little fatalistic view in life. You have to remember that in Yemen, every second child would not reach the age of 12. He would die before that. 40% of the children would die before the age of 1 year. If you look at the picture here, there's a young Yemenite bride. I interviewed her mother, and her mother told me that she gave birth to 10 children, 2 of them in Israel, including the young girl here. She said 4 of them passed away, and that was regular. 4 of them passed away in Yemen, 2 of them on the journey to Israel. That was a situation. By the way, the woman I interviewed was my mother-in-law and her daughter. Then you can see here the Yemenite bride. That was itself my wife. Anyhow, years after the absorption, actually in the 60s, the case of the issue of the missing children was raised again, because a lot of parents received letters, notifications from the authorities, for example, call for army service or the examinations you had to do prior your recruitment, as well as paying TV and radio fee and so on. And it was addressed to those children. And then the parents said, listen, if they call our son or daughter for the army, and if they want to recruit him, so he must be alive. And then for the first time, I would say it went up to the top of the public agenda in Israel. It was investigated by a commission of inquiry. They closed almost all the cases. It was in 67, 68. That was the first commission. About 22 children they didn't manage to find. 4 children were found alive, all of them girls, 2 of them adopted, but there was no illegal adoption. They were simply separated from their parents. I told you I've been dealing with the issue for so many years. So one of the things what I did was I tried to compare to see if there's a correlation between the general mortality of infants in Israel and the period, the years when the Yemenites came. And as you can see here, if you can see the first curve, in 1949, the mortality of infants in Israel was the highest ever, 51 to 1,000 children. And that's exactly also the same period where the major part of the immigrants from Yemen arrived in Israel, 35,000. There were rumors that the children had been kidnapped, abducted by authorities or by private people. It was published in a weekly, which doesn't exist anymore, called Haolam Hazeh, and they claimed that the children were sold, simply sold to American Jewish families for the amount of $5,000. It was investigated and nothing was found about it. I mean, there was no evidence. Certain groups, especially the Satmar Hasidim in New York and also in Israel, tried to take advantage of this situation of, should we call it this tragic issue, and published also books. In one of them, they call it Genocide in the Holy Land, and the other one, as you can see here, is published in Hebrew, again claiming that the state, the government, the authorities were behind these so-called abductions and kidnaps. In 1994, and very special, extreme Yemenite rabbi called Uzzah Meshulam barricaded him together with his supporters in the compound of his house in 1994, again claiming that the children had been kidnapped. He threatened the police, the neighbors, and so on. In the end, the police broke in there. He was arrested, and the supporters. But it was very tragic, because a young soldier that you can see here, his name was Shlomo Asolin, who had deserted from the army, started to shoot at a police helicopter with his military weapon, and he was shot down and killed by a police sniper. So this is showing you something about this issue. Again, it has been investigated by 3 committees of inquiry, and a few years ago also by a commission, a parliamentary commission of the Knesset. No child has been found abducted or kidnapped. Less than 30 children, Yemenite children, have been adopted here in Israel, all of them legally, mostly children of young women who were not married or married to much older men, husbands, and were separated and were not able to bring up the children. 2 things I want to mention, and then I'll be open for questions. I would just speaking about Yemen. Also, it's not connected directly to the Yemen Jewry. I just want to tell you it's an issue which has been classified for many years, and it was opened a few years ago. In 1964 to 1966, Israel was involved in the civil war in Yemen, transferring weapons to the Imam, to the king, and his forces, by the request of England, of members, should we say, of the British cabinet, because not everyone was told what was going on. It was an operation. The initiative to this operation was the MI6, and Israel cooperated, and 16 times Israeli aircraft transported a weapon and parachuted it to Yemen. It was really dangerous, because there was not the radar and all the sophisticated equipment that you have got today, and the airplanes had to fly during the night over Saudi Arabia, but it worked out. And should we say, for Israel, it was important due to 2 reasons. First of all, it improved our connections with England, with Britain, and Britain was already starting to sell weapons to Israel. And secondly, the rebellions, those who were against the king in Yemen, were supported by Nasser, by Egypt. That means that the Imam is the enemy of your enemies. So that was a second reason to help them. I want to go to the last 2 slides. From 62 to 1991, the gates of Yemen was locked. And when I speak about locked gates, we have to remember in 48, 49, 50, up to 52, about 50,000 Jews from Yemen left for Israel. Some were left back They didn't want to leave, mostly. Now, there were different estimates how many Jews were left in Yemen. Some were speaking about 1,000, 7,200. And now today we know that there were left about 1,700. And they were not allowed to go out. There were certain Jewish organizations, especially in America, also former Yemenites, who kept a connection with these Jews and tried to make it possible for them to improve their lives a little and not to lose their hopes. In 1992, in the 90s, should we say from the 90s, there was a shift. And the reason was that the president of Yemen, not a very nice person, called Salah, you can see him here, by the way, a very good friend of Saddam Hussein, that went to the same military college in Baghdad. He wanted to improve the situation of Yemen, and he understood he needed money. And the only place who could get money was from Western Europe, the EU, and from America. And they were ready to provide him with money. But they said, listen, we have got two conditions. One condition is you need to have a reform, economic reform. The second, that's a matter of human rights. And that was especially the Americans. And I would like to point out, name a man who is not with us anymore. The gentleman you can see here, his name is Richard Schiffner. He was a lawyer in New York. And for the time period we speak about, I mean, 85 to 92, he was working in the administration of the State Department. He was the Assistant Secretary for Human Rights. He is the person who also, he had a key position in the struggle for the liberation of the Jews of Soviet Union. It's such an important person. He was very modest. By the way, he was born in Austria, and just before the outbreak of World War II, when he was 15, he had to say farewell to his parents, who later on were murdered by the Nazis. And as a young boy, he came to New York. He was brought up by his uncle, and he never forgot what it means to be a Jew. So he had a key position within the struggle for the Soviet and Russian Jewry, and exactly the same means he used also for the work, for the struggle of the Jews left in Yemen. Of course, much more a smaller scale, much less people, and the Jews actually, as we could see from 92 and up to 10 months ago, managed to get out of the country. The major part of them are living today in Israel and have been absorbed pretty well. I would like to conclude my presentation with a short video clip, and I think it's very emotional minded. These are some of these Jews who managed to go out of Yemen. I think the clip is from, it's about 10 or 11 years ago. Now you have to understand the situation. They are getting out of Yemen and via another country, coming with an airplane to Israel, and for the first time they are landing in Israel, of course in Ben Gurion Airport, and their relatives are waiting for them with such tension that some of the relatives by themselves got out of Yemen 2 years ago, 3 years ago. The rest of them are Jews who came 50, 60, 70 years ago, or they are the second generation of their brothers and sisters. So this event is so nice, and it's also interesting to see the gentleman, the man is still with his head like the turban like the Yemenites, but with a Western suit. The wife is stepping a little behind, 1 or 2 steps behind, dressed up as the Jews, the Jewish women in Yemen used to be, and I have to show it to you. So I just make stop, and I hope it will work out. Just a minute. Okay. Lynn, just tell me that you're with me. This is the last. This is going to be the end.
Yes, sure. Yeah, we're waiting for the last clip.
Yeah. Okay. Just a minute. Share screen. Okay. Then just tell me if you can hear. If you can,
Yes,
hear
yes,
it.
we can.
Okay. So it's about 2 minutes. These are the relatives in Israel. You can see they are waiting. Yeah. They're expecting. This is a lady who came 1 or 2 years ago, also from Yemen. They speak Yemenite, the Yemenite language is a woman, she doesn't know Hebrew, and the country.
ברוך השם, כן.
This is the military radio. Okay, I will break it here, I'll stop it here, and screen.
Okay.
That's it. So, as you can see, we don't have to be sad. All the Yemenite Jews are out of Yemen. It's not a very nice place to live today. And the culture and the heritage of the Yemenite Jewry is still existent and will be doing it also for many years to come. So thank you for your attention. If there are any questions, I shall try to answer.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Levitan. That was absolutely fantastic. My question is, what happened to the very last Jews from Yemen? We heard some families went to Abu Dhabi and perhaps 13 went to Egypt. Is that true?
I also heard about those who went to Egypt. I haven't followed up, so I can't tell you. One of the things would happen, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, it was also presented by Netanyahu when he still was a prime minister, was that they managed to take a very old Sefer Torah with them. And it was written on the skin of a deer, which we are not used to in Europe or in the West, but they probably had some deers in Yemen. And it was presented to Netanyahu, and he also showed it in the media. Now the Yemenite authorities got totally mad, and they said this is belonging to Yemen. And this Jew, who had handed one of them was who had handed it over to other Jews. Anyhow, he was jailed in Yemen, and then some of his relatives didn't want to leave. In the end, he was allowed to leave, but I think the condition was that he should go to Egypt. I don't know for how long time they stayed in Egypt. I know the last 13 Jews who left in the end of March 21 came to Dubai and the Emirates, and they said that they would have better financial possibilities, economic possibilities to make a living.
Okay, well, thank you. Yes, please do write your questions in the chat. We do have a few questions here. Jacqueline wants to know when and how was the neighborhood of Kerem HaTeimanim founded in Tel Aviv?
When and how?
Yes.
Well, I'm not a specialist on that area, but I can tell you it was during the I know it from the books from the 20s and the 30s. It definitely existed already. It was not such a prominent area of residence today. If you want to buy a flat or an apartment there, you have to pay a lot of money. Today, it's
Yes.
I can see that some people write, not only Yemenite children, also from Iraq, Algeria, and Tunisia. It's
Yes.
right. You're speaking about the missing Yemenite children. About 70 to 75% of the children are Yemenite, but including the same thing is happening about the children from North Africa or from Iraq, and there are also a few Ashkenazim from Europe. Not a single adopted child has been found. So my conclusion is very, very clear.
Right.
The way of absorption, the way of treatment was not very nice. I mean, and people admit it today, but Israel did not kidnap children, did not adopt children illegally or smuggle them out and send them to America or use them for medical practice or something like that.
Right. Would you like to answer the question from Nahum about Yemenites who were brought to the US by the Satmar?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, if there's a group of Jews who have played such a negative role in the history of the modern Jewry in Yemen, those are the Satmars. Now that started already in the 70s and the 80s. They were allowed, I mean, the Hasidim of the Satmars were allowed to go into Yemen because they were anti-Zionistic. And they met there with Jews and they made some very, very lousy or black business. They bought from them Sifrei Torah, old documents and books, handwritings and so on, and paid them a very little price for it and took it to America. That was one thing. Later on, before that the Jews were allowed to leave, should we say, in a free way, they had a special arrangement with the authorities that children were allowed to go to New York to study on their yeshivas. Later on, also the families came, and then they took their passports and they treated them in the worst possible way. So speaking about the Satmar Hasidim, they have played a very negative role.
Absolutely. Charlie's question is who were the commanders of the Geulah camp during Magic Carpet? And he understands the first two were corrupt and the third one was a good person who was loved by the Yemenites.
Just a minute. Where we got?
That's
okay.
Charlie Harvey. Yes.
I think you mix up with two camps. There was one camp which was, should we say, accommodations were pretty good, as good they could be, which was established in 1944, and that was the Geulah camp. And there were different, it was financed by the Joint Little also Jewish Agency. And about 2,200 Jews lived in that camp, waiting for the day they could go to Israel. By the way, my wife's parents and brothers were living there. My father-in-law, he passed away, was a rabbi and a teacher in that camp. The first leader, the first director, was a very nice person. His name was Dr. Bagel. He was a medical doctor. And then there came two other, I don't think they were corrupt, but they didn't treat the Yemenites in a nice way. One of them was also a medical doctor, a woman called Olga, I don't remember the second name. And well, that's again the same story that I told you before. They were looking down at the Yemenites. They didn't treat them as, should we say, equal persons. but I don't think they were corrupt.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that's it for the questions. Can you see any that I've missed?
No.
Well, there's one question. Question I can see. I understand archive pertaining to the missing children are still classified and will not be open for another 50 years. Is this correct? No, it's not correct. I want to tell you, I think I'm maybe the only person who has seen, I mean, outside the commissions and so on, and the people working in the archives who have seen almost all the documents. What is classified is only names. I mean, if it's medical records or documents of adoption. However, if there's a person who thinks that he has been adopted, he has got all the right, the legal right to open these classified documents as well. If there's a family, relatives, who think that their missing uncle, father, mother, sister, whatever it is, has been adopted, they can raise the question. They will not get the documents, but they will get an answer whether this person has been adopted or not.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, there's a question about language. Is the Hebrew spoken by the Yemenites more authentic in some way?
Yeah, indeed, yes. They're speaking a very interesting Hebrew. First of all, they're using the kamats, the o, like we did it before we used the Sephardic, should we say, Hebrew. Now, it was stated already in the 20s by the chief rabbi of Israel, Palestine at that time, Rabbi Cook, who was an outstanding rabbinical figure. And he said, he was also the founder of the Merkaz Harav Yeshiva in Jerusalem. And he said, the most authentic Hebrew, the right way to speak Hebrew is as the Yemenites do. All the rest of us have been influenced by Hungarians, Polish, North African, etc. No doubt of that. You see, in Yemen, there was no assimilation. There were no secular Jews. All the Jews were traditional and observant, and they were very, very pedantic with the Hebrew. By the way, they're also writing a beautiful Hebrew.
Amazing, fantastic. Okay, I think we've come to the end of the questions, unless I've missed any. Lots of compliments. People have enjoyed your talk very much, Dr. Levitan. So I think it just remains for me to...
Can I have one last question?
One last question from Lawrence here.
We went to Mahane Yehuda Market and had this incredible pizza. What's it called?
Malawa.
Malawa. Where can you get malawa? Where would you recommend you go and get malawa?
Apart from your own house.
Sorry, when we were younger, my wife used to prepare it by herself, as she has learned from her mother. But we have been spoiled, so we buy the malawa, I have to admit, in the supermarket today.
Okay, I was going to invite you to Kerem Hateimanim to share a malawa with me on our next visit to Israel. Oh, and Ariel says, don't forget the jahnoon.
Okay, thank you.
No, we won't. Okay, and Vivian says there's an expert. There's an expert in the preparation of some food or other. Sorry, I can't quite see it. But it just remains for me really to thank you for a superb talk. Thank you so much for that wonderful overview. Ending with a very moving clip of the reunited Yemeni families. So just to remind everybody that in 2 weeks' time, we have another lockdown lecture. This time it'll be in French. It's called Alger, Jérusalem, Mon Voyage Interdit, and it's about the forbidden voyage of an Algerian Jew from Algiers to Jerusalem. So do join us then. Just a word about our very special event at the end of March, which is grandchildren interviewing grandparents. And we'd like to invite volunteers. If you would like to be interviewed by your grandchildren and you have interesting stories to tell about your life in Arab countries or Muslim countries, please do write to us at info@harif.org. And we'd be very happy to hear from you. So as is our custom, we will now unmute everybody so you can say goodbye. And I'd just like to thank Dr. Levitan once again for a wonderful talk. Thank you so much. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. And the picture from the Ben Gurion airport was